Yeah, yeah. So we're his sister, one of his sisters, is a fiance to Marty Schmertz. So yeah, I think so. Okay, let's get started. Um, Mesiras Aveda lemishtara o lemechlakata avedut. Giving over a lost item to the police or to some kind of office that deals with lost items. Okay, so the shaila is as follows. Matzati aveda sheyesh basimin b'merkaz ha'ir. I found a lost item. In other words, an item of value, and it has a siman. Say it's a gold watch. I found it in the middle of the city on Ben Yehuda. And ha'im mutter li l'mosra l'mechlakata avedot shel hamishtara. Can I give it over to the division of lost items in the police? In other words, do I fulfill my mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda thereby? Or am I obligated to do, like the Gemara says, to do a hachraza, to make a public announcement, put up postings on, on the street, and so forth? Uma hadin lagabi metzia shemetzati ba'otobus shel chevrat eged. And what should I do if I find something on the Eged bus, or you could say now on the train, right? Am I obligated should I just give it over to the lost items division of the Eged bus company? I'm sure they must have some window. TTC lost in fact. I'm sure there must be a window. Is there a window at the TTC? At Bay? Ah, okay. Oh, really? Okay. I'm I'm sure in the I'm sure in the central bus station in Jerusalem, there's got to be some office.
Lots of umbrellas.
Yeah, yeah, umbrellas. Yeah. Okay, so here's the tshuva. Adam shematza aveda chayav lishmor aleha ulefarsem ota im yesh basimin. When you find a lost item that has an identifiable sign on it, you're obligated to watch over it and to publicize that you found something. Kagon sheyitle modaot bevatei knesiyot uvatei midrashot shebe'ezor mitziata aveda. So nowadays, you would normally have to do is post signs in the shuls and the batei medrash in the area of where you found the lost item, or in the front of the makolet on a bulletin board. And you'd have to also post signs on the place where you found the lost item. If there is a newspaper that has a free space for posting lost items, you have to do it there also. So, and the Makor Baruch just says, this is based on the Shulchan Aruch. It says, Hamotzei Aveda Machizla Bevati Knesios Uvate Midrashos. He says, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, that when you find a lost item, you publicly announce that you've found something on the wall of the base medrash or the base hakneses, or you make a public announcement. Upashat the kavanas Shulchan Aruch lav dafka lebeis knesses ela sheish lefarsim b'chol makom sheharbei anashim mitasfim. It doesn't simply mean just in the synagogue. Any public area, like a JCC, right, would also count. Ubizmanenu yitle modot v'yafarsem be'itonim kamo shekosav harabeinu hagon hamachaber shlita, and that translates into putting it in a newspaper. Bimzeh aveda shehi mechafetzei nashim yafarsem bezrat nashim. If it's a woman's lost item, right? So let's say it's a ring, a diamond ring, or something like that. So then you should publicize it in a place where women will see it, such as in the Ezras Nashim of the, or in front of a store where you know that women frequent. And and you have to make sure that the sign that you've posted is there at least a week or two. באופן שיש סבירות שהמודעה כבר פרסמה את האבדה. In such a way where you can reasonably assume that that sign has publicized the matter. Okay, אבל אם הדבר כרוך בהוצאת ממון, הוא לא חייב להוציא הצעות מכספו. But if it involves expenditure of money in order to publicize the issue, that the halacha does not obligate you to do. Now, where do we know this from? Like, why did he only say that if it's a newspaper that offers space for free? Why shouldn't I have to take a paid ad to put something in a newspaper? It could be. It could be. Well, I mean, there are certain expenditures you have to make to preserve the mitzvah. Let's say it's an animal; you have to feed the animal, right? So it's not like you don't have to spend any money. You do have a right to demand compensation. When the owner comes back and retrieves his animal, you can give him an invoice for your costs. But there are expenditures that you are expected to make to fulfill this mitzvah. So why is it that you don't have to spend money to publicize the loss? So he says, Kain yesh lilmod. So we're just looking at the footnote. He says this can be derived from the language of the Shulchan Aruch itself. V'zel l'shono misha avdalo aveda upaga ba'avedaso uva'avedat chavero im yachol lahachzir et shtehen chayav lahachziram. He says if you lose an item, you personally lose an item, and in the course of retrieving your lost item, you end up finding your lost item and someone else's lost item. So, so then if you can retrieve both your lost item and your friend's lost item, that would be the preferred thing to do. V'im lo yachzir et shelo sha'avedato kodemet afilu la'avedat aviv v'rabo. But if you can only retrieve one of them, then yours comes first. The priority is for your own lost item over someone else's lost item. I don't know, you can probably think of multiple scenarios. Right, generally speaking, your life comes first. But we're also saying that your financial wholeness comes first. And this is derived from the pasuk that you may not allow yourself to become impoverished in order to help somebody else. Despite that being the letter of the law, a person should not rely on that all the time. A person has every right, and it's the moral thing, to go beyond the letter of the law and not to say all the time that my things come first. Imlo behefsid muchach, unless it's a significant loss. Vim tamid medaktek porek mimenu ol gemilos chasodim v'sof labrios adkan lashona. And if you're always putting yourself first without making any exceptions, so then you're removing the yoke of gemilus chasodim, of doing acts of kindness for others, and eventually you'll become dependent on others financially, because the key to financial success is when you help others financially. Okay. Now, ubir sham. So that's the quote from the Shulchan Aruch. So what does that have to do with our discussion? Ubir sham hasma shalom dimei hapasuk anal lihizor min ha'anius. What does the pasuk mean? Like, what are the rabbis deriving from this pasuk? Efes ki lo yihiyeh v'cha evyon. However, there should never be among you a poor person. You have to make sure that you don't allow yourself to become impoverished. That's what we learn from this pasuk. Don't allow yourself to fall into poverty by, let's say, giving too much tzedakah. And don't allow yourself to fall into poverty by taking care of others' financial needs before yours are taken care of. But he says, "Umitam zeh lav davka avedato kodemet ka'amar Ela kol hefsid mamon o bitul mulacha shalo machmat hashabazu shalo kodem adkan devarav. But that it doesn't just mean that you have to reach, you're entitled to retrieve your lost item before your friends. But let's say the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda is going to completely interrupt your ability to make a parnasa. You'll have to take off so much time that you A, may lose your job, or even B, if you don't lose your job, you may end up not making any money. So that you need in order to support your family. So then you can exempt yourself from the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. V'chein kasav lahedja b'shulchan aruch hagraz v'zelushono, aval eno chayiv lahotzi mamon al zeh, ela im ken yadu lo beveru shechaveru yishalim lo me'atzmo ad kan l'shono. The Rab Shulchan Aruch says that you're not allowed to expend money in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, unless you know for certain that you'll be compensated for it, right? So you're not obligated to, but there are things that you are obligated to do. Let's say when you find, let's say, a living animal, you do have to feed it. So there are limits to this law, and I'm not sure how to apply those limits and when to apply those limits. But let's see as we go along. Let's see how we maneuver this. How we maneuver this. Whatever money you end up spending, you are entitled to demand payment from the person. But if you can fulfill the mitzvah without spending money, then you're not obligated to spend money. Yeah, you're not obligated to do that. No. Actually, I'm not so sure about that. In other words, it could be that you're entitled to ask him for compensation. What if the guy tells you, I would have discovered that you lost the item even if you hadn't spent that money to pay for the color professionally printed posters. That's something for the Beis Din to determine. Really, and I'm saying, you take it. Right. So that we know that's an explicit Gemara. The Gemara says that you're not that would be wrong for you to spend more than the value of the item in order to return the item. You're not supposed to. That for sure you're not supposed to do.
I'm exaggerating to make a point.
Right. So for example, in a situation like that, you sell the item and then hold on, write it down in a ledger that there's, let's say, a $2 debt to someone should they claim the lost item. So you can post it that you found an item that's worth $2, and if after a week or two no one comes to claim it, you're allowed to sell it and just hold on to that money or make a note of it that if anyone comes to claim the item, I'll give them the $2 or whatever it is. Normally, we say that you're supposed to be machriz for 30 days. You're supposed to make an announcement for 30 days. However, it all depends on what the likelihood of a person finding out about it. So Rav Sharaga says that in certain social situations like today, a week or two should be sufficient. I don't know. I'm trying to remember whether the 30-day period is an absolute or not. He seems to think it's not an absolute. Okay, so but the question here is, question here is, let's say you want to save yourself all the hassle and just give this over to the police who have a special division for lost items, for lost and found. Venira, the kaven sheyesh sevirut gedola, sha'adam shema'abed chayfetz chashuv poneh lemishtara. It seems to me, says Rav Sharaga, that since it's very logical to assume that someone who loses an item of value is going to turn to the police, then it is permissible to give over this item to the police division of lost and found.
They hold for 60 days, so they doubled up to 30 days.
Uh-huh.
bicycles for what at least they don't 30. But I mean,
It's
depending on
probably
those
because it
things-
takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
possibly.
yeah.
I just want to follow up on Sal's question about the money that you're spending.
Yeah.
You're spending, say, PPM.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to say to the finder if they refuse to pay, not returning it then if you don't? pay
Yeah,
it?
yeah, you are allowed to say that, and what you can do is but
Or you just tell the-
no, but you have to go to Basin. You have to go to Basin. Let's go adjudicate the matter then. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, they don't want, they don't want to bombard it with something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of the police code. We don't want to be bombarded with lots of crap. Yeah.
It sounds like the TTC will take anything, say they have a database. They can search. That they can search when you contact
Oh, they have a database that they have, let's say,
on all the lost items that they've had.
on an internal database. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Right. Okay.
I mean, you're not to take the pros of the animal, it's the eggs from the chicken, or beef from the cow.
Yes, that's actually part of that. The Gemara discusses that. Yeah. But I think you have to mark down how much you ended up taking. And if you ended up selling the eggs or the milk, I'm trying to remember what you do with it. Yeah, you can actually yeah. Well, you're learning Hashavas Aveda now, aren't you? Aren't you in Elu Metzias now?
Yeah.
Okay.
This overlap is quite impressive.
Okay. V'chein pasku b'sefer dinei mominis, uvepischei choshen, uvesefer hashavas aveda kehilchasa. This is also brought down in a number of svarim that deal with the halacha l'maisa issue of hashavas aveda, that giving over an item to the police is sufficient. V'chol haposkim hanal hitnu shahinu davka kshamishhtara noeget keroi uchafi hadin. And the poskim all say that they stipulate that, they give you a conditional heter. They say this is all predicated on the fact that the police are behaving correctly. The chashash sheyitnu et aveda lemi she'eno shelo ayin sham. And you're not concerned that they may end up giving the item to someone who it doesn't belong to. V'zehu kamo sheimshich kan Rabbeinu hagon hamachaber shlita. And as we'll see, Rav Shirag is going to say that explicitly. So let's continue along these lines. Avol kol ze b'tanai she'hamishtara mitnaheget al pi hahalacha. This is all assuming that the police behave themselves. Dahainu shemachzirim et ha'aveda al yedei chakira udrisha v'kabola simonim kefi hadin, which means that they're not just going to surrender the item to the first shmendrik who comes along and says, my wife lost her diamond ring. Oh, that's it. In other words, anyone can do that. Whereas the police have to have a system in place that does its best to make sure that the person claiming the lost item has to provide a siman, has to provide an identifying sign that only the owner could have known about. But if they don't return lost items using the siman system, right? They just give it to any shmendrik who says, I lost it. Or like they say, here, look through this and let us know if you find it. Yeah, right. Which one's yours, right? Or they don't keep the lost item according to the halacha, then you shouldn't give it to them. I don't know what the TTC's policy like. Do they have a written policy as far as what you have to do to retrieve your lost ring or
I
something?
think you have to describe it, they check the database and see whether.
Uh-huh. Okay.
You have to tell them.
I wonder if this is a written policy they have. But let us know if you find anything.
Yeah, but I said.
V'chein ma shelefi hachok hamotzei zoche bevailus ha'aveda im kiyem et chovot hachok hamutalot olav. He says, v'chein mashal lefi achok, and similarly, based on the current law, if you find a lost item, um, and no one claims it, and you did everything that you're obligated to do to announce it, then eventually you'll be able to keep the item that you found. ולא נמצא בעל הבית תוך זמן מסוים, זה דבר שנוגד את ההלכה, ואסור לו לקחת אותה לעצמו שלא כפי דין תורה. And therefore you would not be allowed to. Let's say you find an item with a siman, and no one ends up claiming it. If the police say, well, we've kept this item. If after 30 days no one claims it, we'll let you keep the item. So he says that goes against the halacha, and you're not allowed to keep it for yourself.
So they have an option, so you can find cameras, video equipment, umbrellas, even computers.
So he says, if you take a look at the Makor Bach, he says that's not the normative halacha. Ki lafi din Torah, tzarech hamotze lishmor et aveda etzlo ad sheyimtza et bal ha'aveda. The finder has to watch over the item until he finds the owner. Oh, ad sheyavo Eliyahu yigalalo mi bal haveda, kamo shekasuf b'Bava Metzia. Or Bava Metzia says it may have to remain to you until Eliyahu Hanavi comes. Now, when we learned this originally, when we learned the halachos of Hashavas Aveda, we also learned that you do have the option of selling it if you no longer can have space for it or if it's a burden for you. Or let's say like a laptop. If you hold it for more than a year, it's going to lose most of its value, And so you're better off selling it and holding on to the money and just saying, if the owner comes, I'll just give him the cash. So the same, right? Anything perishable. I don't know if the police have such a policy. In other words, you can't dictate to the police what they should do with your photo. The Rambam writes this. He says, if you did your obligation by announcing the lost item and no one came to claim it, the item should stay with you until Eliyahu Hanavi comes. So what if the police don't have that policy? So Rav Sharaga says something really interesting. He says, if they tell you that you can keep it if the person doesn't claim it within 30 days, you're not allowed to keep it if it goes against the halacha. What you might be allowed to do is retrieve it from the police and say, no one's come. Instead of you selling it, let me take it back. And then you hold on to it, or you sell it and put it in your ledger that this is what the item sold for. Now, what's interesting is, what about if the police say, no, once you surrender it, it's in police possession, and if no one comes to claim it, we're going to end up selling it. Has anyone ever gone to those auctions? Have you ever gone? Anyway, so this throws a wrench into this whole heter of surrendering it to the police, because now he seems to be saying that if they're not going to hold it indefinitely, then you wouldn't be allowed to give it to them. So let's see how he maneuvers this. He says, "V'hagrashaz orbach zatzal kasav letzadei sheyuchal limsor et aveda lemishtara v'lirshom b'pinkaso et aveda shemasarim simanea." Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal said that you could give over the lost item to the police, and then write down on your own personal ledger, this is the lost item that I gave to the police. V'im yitbarer שהמשטרה החזירה את האבדה שלא כדין, ישלם לבעליו. And then if it turns out that the police incorrectly handled the item, either because they gave it to the wrong party, because they didn't ask for a proper simanim, or because they ended up selling it, then you'd have a halachic obligation to pay the value to the person who comes later to retrieve it. And the reason why that's an acceptable thing to do is because the owner will eventually retrieve his item either through the police or through you in cash equivalent. He says, V'yesh od derech. And there's another way to do this. Oh, this goes like to Doug's issue. He says, you can give the details, your personal information to the police. You can give a description of the item that you found, give that to the police. And they, the police, well, when they take the report of a lost item, they'll refer the person who comes to the police to the person. Now, is that an option today? Isn't there a lost and found division in the police?
Yeah, I just posted the thing for TPS from that it has to be a $500 value, and there has to be a public interest in them taking the goods like medication, something like that. It sounds like there are very few things about public vendors added condition.
Oh, you mean as an exception to the 500?
No, there's only take goods where there's a public interest that they should take it. It's so important that they should take
It
it.
has to meet both criteria.
Yeah, both criteria. That'll be. I don't know if there's a public interest in taking computers.
Well, what if a person has invaluable data on his laptop?
I guess that's their problem.
Yeah, apparently according to TTC, if they find passports, they return it to Passport Canada. They don't even hold on to it, it just goes back.
I guess they have to.
And international passports are sent to the consulate.
I once lost my passport at Pearson. And I had to go all the way back, and someone was holding it for me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Left the airport or you were at the airport?
I had left the airport already. And I left, I had dropped my passport. I don't remember what happened exactly. I did get lucky. In the bins, yeah. Yeah, and you hear it over the loudspeaker. Someone please come back to the security area. Yeah, it was, I believe so. I believe so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it passes from one generation to the next. I know we learned this halacha. I just don't remember what we ended up saying. I know we ended up learning this halacha. But it could be that if it's a short-term thing, like what if a person finds a lost item and then the next day he passes away? So then the Yorshim certainly would have an obligation. The question is, does it expire after a certain amount of time? Yeah. Correct. Probably makes sense to mark down that this, put it in a special area and maybe put it in an envelope that has a label on it. Yeah. Okay, we'll hold it here today. We'll continue this halacha tomorrow. Yeah. Thanks, Barry. Thanks for the reminder. I said that when I first came in.